told success comes from a combination of effort and talent. You find what you're good at and work hard at it. And the media is filled with countless examples of entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and academics who've charted that path and succeeded. We're told that if only we can apply their life lessons and principles, we too can emulate their success. We too can have the life that we desire. But what if this worldview is not only inaccurate, but also toxic? What if the success of these incredibly successful people that we see everywhere is not actually due to their own skill, but due in a large part to chance? What if by truly understanding randomness, we could put measures in place to set realistic expectations and prevent ourselves from falling into the trappings of both excessive failure and excessive success, helping us lead simpler, more purposeful lives? Hey guys, I'm Tom and welcome to the third episode in our mental model series. Today we're going to be talking about randomness, luck, chance, whatever you want to call it, and the large but invisible role that it plays within our lives. First, we're going to be looking at the role that randomness plays in different types of jobs, before looking at the link between randomness and incredible success, and why it's dangerous to think that just because a person is very successful, it therefore means that they're skilled. Finally, we're going to look at 3 different ways that we can integrate living with randomness in our lives and really make the most of it and take advantage of the randomness out there. To get a grip on the role of randomness in our lives, it's helpful to take a very simplistic view about us as humans by thinking of us as generators. Now, with a generator, you have inputs, the generator then performs some action, and you then have the output. In this example, we're going to take 2 different types of generators, one which is the piano player and the other which is an entrepreneur. Now, both of them have outputs. The piano player's output is beautiful music and the entrepreneur's output is successful businesses. Now, if we look at the inputs that feed into the piano player's generator, we have a few key ones, and mainly it is just practiced time. You can't expect that a piano player would be able to sit down and randomly bash a bunch of keys and perform a beautiful piece of music. They need to be able to hone their skill by practicing. Now sure, other factors play into the output of the music, for example, the access to education that they might have had and maybe the peers around them and how good they were that might have boosted them to perform better. But generally speaking, you can be pretty sure that when you listen to someone playing the piano, they're performing at a high level because they put in the hours of practice. Now let's contrast this with the example of an entrepreneur and their output of successful businesses. Now, in order to get the output of a successful business, there's hundreds of different variables that come into play. As well as the entrepreneur's skill, you've also got the timing of the market, you've also got their access to connections, their teammates, the general state of the economy, and perhaps venture capital funding. All of these different variables feed into the entrepreneur's generator, which is going to output the result of a successful business. Now, I'm not trying to say that the entrepreneur's skill accounts for nothing when looking at the successful output of businesses. But what I am trying to say is that there's so many different variables in here that are outside the entrepreneur's control that it's very difficult to attribute his success purely to his skill. And that's where we get our first principle of randomness, which is the more random the environment, the less we can attribute the success to skill. And this is a bit of a problem because the higher up the ladder you go in general corporate career, the more random variables there are that are going to attribute to your success. If you're an accountant who's just filing tax returns, doing audits, generally you can say that the output, which is a successful audit, is going to be based on your skill. But when you get higher up to say like a CFO position, there's so many different variables feeding into that generator that it's far less easy to say that the result of that is due to the CFO's skill, which is a bit of a paradox because what we're saying is as we get more and more up the ladder, you're judged less and less on your actual skill. So now we've had a look at how individual professions have a differing reliance on randomness. Let's have a look at the wildly successful. These are the people who might be giving TED Talks, who might have interviews where people are trying to dissect their principles and tips for success. They might have newspaper articles wrote about them. They've probably had multiple successes in their career. Now, surely because they've had so many successes, this can't be down to randomness, can it? Well, let's have a look. Let's take the example of someone we all know well, Elon Musk, and let's just have a look through his life story. So Elon started at a very young age programming, and this allowed him to create his first company, which was a maps company that he sold. He then took that money and doubled down on PayPal, which was then a great success. He then took that money that he made from his exit and doubled down again on Tesla and SpaceX. Now, there's a couple of things to note here. The first is that Elon was in the exact right place at the exact right time. He had a passion for programming and a competency to code when computing was becoming the next big thing, and this ultimately allowed him to get his first breakout success. From then on, Elon's just been doubling down every time, taking huge risks by investing in the next big thing. And this is where the problem arises. He's taken these risks and they ended up paying off for him. But what we don't see is the graveyard of entrepreneurs out there who took similar audacious risks but ended up failing. And we just see the one piece of success, which is Elon, without seeing everyone else around him who failed. Put it this way. If you had a group of 10,000 people all playing Russian roulette every year, and there was a 50% chance that they were going to win $1 million and a 50% chance that they were going to die, after 20 years you would have people who had a huge amount of money, but the majority of people would be dead. So it's just this sort of analogy that when we look at an entrepreneur, we're only seeing their success and not the other people who failed. And this leads us to our second principle of randomness, that the larger the success, the more attributable that success is to randomness. Because in order to get to the successful position that they needed to be, they needed to take huge risks that involved a lot of chance. Of course, this isn't a sexy story. You're not going to see in the newspaper, there's a 1 in a million chance of being a successful entrepreneur, and Elon Musk just happened to be in the right place at the right time. What you're more likely to see is Elon succeeded because he's different from you. He works, 80, 90-hour weeks. He thinks from first principles. And I'm not saying that these things aren't true. He's an incredibly insightful and hardworking entrepreneur. All I'm trying to say is that by thinking that we can apply the same principles that he has and get the same success is an incredibly dangerous way to think, and that's how these successes are often portrayed. Okay, so what does this mean? Does this mean that we should just resign ourselves to a life of mediocrity, thinking that the only way we're going to become successful is through, a lot of luck? Do we not take lessons and principles from these successful business people or entrepreneurs because we think it doesn't matter, the only reason they've got there is through chance? Of course not. There's a healthy way that we can integrate randomness into our lives, and that's why I'm going to spend the remainder of the video just talking about 3 different ways that through understanding randomness we can live a really fulfilling life. One of the first things that we can do when looking to take advice or take inspiration from someone successful out there is to implement something called Pascal's Wager. Now, Pascal's Wager states that the optimal strategy is to believe in God. For if God exists, you're going to be rewarded in heaven, but if he doesn't, you don't have anything to lose. So when I'm taking lessons from Elon Musk, I'm always going to apply this principle. So let's look at an example. One reason that Elon Musk says that he's been successful is his ability to think from first principles. And this just involves taking elements and reducing them to their absolute fundamental truths. He did this with Tesla when he said, well, battery prices are overcharged because the cost of lithium is this, the cost of nickel is that. Therefore, that's a first principles way to think, and I can create cars that are going to be significantly cheaper than other electrical cars on the market. Now, for me to implement first principles thinking, it's not really going to require any extra effort in terms of my time. It's just a slightly different way of thinking, and fundamentally, as an engineer, I enjoy thinking in this way. However, when it comes to his work ethic, which is insane, he says like 70, 80-hour weeks, if I implement that and it turns out that that's not actually a principle for success and it's just due to randomness that he's got where he is, I'm going to be in a really bad position because I'm going to have devoted 80 hours of my week every week for the last year or so, or however long it's going to be, building up a business. So unless I'm intrinsically motivated to work that hard, I'm not just going to take this as like a rule that I'm going to go ahead and follow, because the cost of it not paying off is far too high. The second thing that we can do is take a look at the role that randomness is currently playing in our lives. And the way that we do this is look at all of the different roles that we play, whether that's your career, your side hustle, your investment portfolio, and try and ascertain how much of the results are coming due to chance. So for example, if you're an engineer at a software company and your code reviews are going through well and you're delivering features that don't have bugs, you can be pretty sure that that's because you're a skilled engineer. It's not due to randomness that the output is good. But my job is as a product manager, and I'm assessed on the result of my product. But there's so many different things, such as the mood of the market, the team that I'm working in, how much funding our company has, that ultimately impact how successful that product's going to be, that actually I would say my profession is very, very much based on randomness. Because if I'm only assessed on the results of my last product, and if randomness conspires against me so that product isn't a success, it's going to put me in a pretty bad position. So once you've got an insight into the various roles you play and the various risk profiles, you're going to want to balance that out so that you have enough in your control that you can say, well, I'm not affected by randomness here, I'm going to be guaranteed this level of success, but also a bit out of your control so that if randomness goes your way and if you get lucky, things can really kick off. So an example of this might be you have a really reliable 9 to 5 where you're working and you're getting paid for your skill, and then you might also have a side hustle that is, I don't know, some Instagram jewelry brand that if it kicks off, you're going to be made massively wealthy. So these are just different ways that you can think about risk and really sort of capitalize on the randomness out there without being a complete slave to it. I should say as a caveat that doing this honestly is actually really tricky, because you're going to have a tendency to think, especially if you've been successful in any of your careers, that, well, that's due to my skill. And actually just sort of taking a objective view of it and trying to see all the different forces that play into the output of your success. It's definitely an ego exercise to say, no, actually a lot of my success has been due to chance. One of the final things that we can do is adopt a Stoic philosophy to life. Now this video is too short for me to really go into the ins and outs of Stoicism, but really the fundamentals of it are that you recognise what's in your control and you do everything you can to make those things work, and you also recognise what's out of your control and you just say, okay, that's out of my control, I'm not going to stress about it. And this is a really helpful way to live in a world where there is so much randomness, because otherwise you can get very obsessive over the things that aren't necessarily in your control. I'll leave some resources to Stoicism in the description if the general philosophy appeals to you. There's loads of great content out there on YouTube about it. So thanks a lot for sticking around to the end. We've gone through why understanding randomness is so important to understanding success, and why we should be very skeptical when we see narratives being played out about why people have become so successful, because ultimately the more successful somebody is, the larger the probability is that that's going to be due to randomness. Then we went over a few different tactics that you can implement in order to live with harmony and randomness, including talking about Pascal's law, the Barbell Strategy, and of course living with Stoicism. If you found this video helpful, you might want to check out my series here on mental models. So far we've got understanding exponential risk and also signal versus noise, and there's going to be more to come. And as always, if you like the video, give it a like, press subscribe, and share it with any friend that you think might find it useful. Thanks a lot and have a great day.